Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering SpongeBob LongPants and Larry's Gym. If you think about it, these are two episodes that are hype for two reasons. SpongeBob LongPants is hype because Nickelodeon hyped it up a fuck ton. Larry's Gym is hype because it's an episode centering on Larry the Lobster, the first of its kind. Honestly, you'd think Nickelodeon would hype up the episode about the beloved side character, but who am I to decide on Nickelodeon's marketing choices? Well, I guess at the time I was their target audience, so I guess I have good reason to make such commentary. Alright, well, anyway, just want to take a second to say, as always, thank you to everyone watching the video today. I appreciate y'all so much. And now, let's just get right into it. You know, if I had a nickel for every time I thought an episode that was about SpongeBob changing his typical pants style, leading to the people around him treating him differently, and it becoming an identity crisis of sorts was a special episode when it was actually a typical 11-minute episode, I'd have two nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. That Phineas and Ferb bit truly never gets old. But in all seriousness, both To SquarePants or Not to SquarePants and SpongeBob LongPants have fooled me into thinking they are special episodes when they really aren't. And I think that's entirely because of their choice of plot, not because they feel particularly long or anything like that. That and also how they were both heavily marketed to hell and back because of said plot. Speaking of comparisons between SpongeBob LongPants and the SquarePants or Not the SquarePants, let me just say right now that this episode does the whole SpongeBob changes up his look idea much better than that episode, and that is almost entirely because this episode doesn't take itself nearly as seriously, or at least it's better about conveying how not serious it is than To SquarePants or Not to SquarePants. Because it feels weird to say that this show, has ever taken itself seriously. Also, the way that everyone fails to recognize SpongeBob in this episode is actually funny, rather than bordering on being annoying as hell like it was in that episode. So I'd like to say that it seems like the show has learned from its mistakes here. Another related reason why this episode works better for me is that SpongeBob likes the altered perception of himself that he receives here, like it's not hurting him, at least not at first, and even when that plot point comes into play, it just feels a whole lot better than the way the other episode went about it. SpongeBob LongPants begins with SpongeBob being preyed upon by a traveling salesman who, sells him the long pants. I mean, yeah, more happens than that, but that also is essentially what goes down. The salesman tells SpongeBob that the pants make him look mature, and when Patrick sees SpongeBob with the pants and greets him with a "Hey man," SpongeBob is convinced that he really does look older with the pants on. This is Patrick's only appearance in this episode, and I kind of love that. It certainly makes up for his annoying appearance in To SquarePants or Not to SquarePants, I'll tell you that much. But anyway, SpongeBob heads to work with his new long pants, and this is where things start getting really entertaining because we get some role switches here. Since SpongeBob is, I suppose, sightly now, Mr. Krabs decides to put him at the cash register while Squidward is forced back into the kitchen. I think it's funny that somehow SpongeBob wearing shorts is more unsightly than Squidward having no pants at all, as implied by Mr. Krabs' line here. It soon becomes apparent that SpongeBob can't man the cash register after an amusing line about the register being $2,000 short, so Mr. Krabs makes him greet the customers at the front of the restaurant. Because of this new treatment, SpongeBob's personality starts shifting too, and he starts getting a bit of a big head. He decides he's too good for the Krusty Krab when one of the patrons gets ketchup on his long pants, and I love how Mr. Krabs doesn't even protest, just proclaims that SpongeBob is going on a journey to manhood. What is this, the first movie? I'm choosing to believe that this is a quasi-father-son crumb moment. Also, this whole part of the episode reminds me a lot of both As Seen on TV and Model Sponge. Guess that shows that SpongeBob getting a bit carried away with his ego is a consistent trait of his. And, I mean, Smug Bob, as I've decided right now to call him, is frequently a fun watch. Not always, but he's good in this episode. SpongeBob makes his way around town, trying to do things befitting of his long pants, like laying on the charm to a couple of ladies or taking his driver's test with another instructor. Because of SpongeBob's long pants, and definitely not because of his driving, he passes and gets his license, which cuts to a funny cutaway gag with Mrs. Puff sensing that the end of the world has arrived. SpongeBob then goes and works at Fancy, like the restaurant, and he starts going by Sponge Robert, which is just too funny to me. And as the episode continues on, I find myself thinking of how SpongeBob immersing himself into this fancy life with these new fancy friends is done in a much more entertaining way than Porous Pockets, so that's another win for me. Honestly, the more that these newer episodes can dunk on previous writing mistakes, the better. And now that I'm thinking about it, this episode also feels like an improvement on Squidward's School for Grown-Ups in a few ways. I liked the scene at SpongeBob at the movie theater with the fancy people watching an art film about a table for 3 hours. It's even funnier that Squidward turns out to be there too, because of course he would be. When Squidward gets kicked out for talking to SpongeBob, SpongeBob follows him and sees all of his friends, including Mr. Krabs, surprisingly, going to see the new Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy movie that had been brought up at the beginning of the episode, and so marks the end of SpongeBob's era of being fancy, because he ends up not being able to see that movie because of his long pants, until Mr. Krabs steps in and just cuts SpongeBob's legs off. That sounds a lot more violent than it is. Also, I'm taking this as one of my crumbs, I don't care. And then we get the resolution to the gag with Mrs. Puff from earlier, as the driving instructor appears out of nowhere and takes SpongeBob's license now that he has short pants again, and Mrs. Puff is able to sigh a breath of relief. Also, this part of the episode debuts one of my favorite newer tracks in the show, Uku by Laylee, so that's yet another win for me. So many wins in this episode. SpongeBob LongPants was pretty good. I think where this episode was most lacking was in the humor. Like with many episodes of this season, there are certainly funny moments. The episode just doesn't necessarily feel funny, just enjoyable. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it does mean that this episode doesn't have all of the ingredients to give it that wow factor, you know? And so because of that, this episode is going to be put in my great tier, where it comes in with a score of 8.8 out of 10. Up next, we're finally at the episode that elevates Larry the Lobster to semi-main character status, Larry's Gym. Yeah, he's not an official main character, but being as recurring as he is, I mean, he's been a frequent presence since season 1, makes me feel like he deserves to be considered just under 1, which I guess is, what the secondary character label is for, but shush. Really, I think that if Pearl and Karen are going to be considered main characters, Larry probably should be too, but 10 is a good number, so I can see why they don't promote him to main characterhood. But anyway, the best part of Larry's Gym beyond all of this is how it's an episode that just follows another character for once. I think that's pretty cool, and it shows the benefits of having an ensemble cast. Larry's Gym does a great job of making use of the potential of Larry as a character. Squid Plus One built upon the foundation of A Life in a Day by showcasing how funny this lobster can be, and so this episode comes right along to give Larry the chance to hold 11 minutes on his own. And I think that this is a decision that paid off, because even though his character is seemingly limited, I think that Larry can still carry an episode quite nicely. Also, Larry trying to deal with the ridiculousness of our main characters is funny and a good way to spend the episode. Like, it's really nice to get kind of an outside perspective on our usual characters' bullshit for once. Also, I love how Larry doesn't really like basically any of the main characters we see him interact with other than Sandy. Like, it's just funny to me how he's so clearly on the edge of acquaintanceship, and even then he still has a bit of distaste for everyone's bullshit. The plot of this episode is pretty simple. It's pretty much just about the shenanigans that happen after Larry opens his gym. Larry's passion for fitness is funny, especially when you think about how every time he goes off on one of those rants, he's just kind of insulting other people for not being in shape. Maybe he and Squidward would have gotten along better than I thought, given how much they judge people that aren't like them. But anyway, since it's the opening day of the gym, everything is free for one day only. Of course, Mr. Krabs takes this to mean that if he never leaves the gym, then it will always be free, so that's why he's there. As for SpongeBob, well, he's so weak that Larry decides to personally train him. This is so random, but Larry taking SpongeBob on as his personal project reminds me so much of Piccolo deciding to train Gohan in Dragon Ball since he wanted to mold him into the perfect demon like himself. It's all about assuaging your own ego through training. Sorry, I have a lot of thoughts on Dragon Ball, considering it's like my second favorite franchise, and also I just reread it. But anyway, Larry impresses on SpongeBob to always be hydrating, which is a surprise tool that'll help us later. Eventually, after SpongeBob struggles for a while, Larry finds that having SpongeBob do sit-ups while laughing is something he can do to grow stronger, so Larry has SpongeBob do that while he's got a mountain of paperwork to do. And really, I like the role reversal in this episode, where SpongeBob becomes this ultra mega ripped dude straight out of Dragon Ball Z, whereas Larry wastes away doing paperwork. I try to ignore the fact that this episode is fat-phobic and all that jazz, because of course it is. I literally did not expect anything different, so I won't be going on a soapbox about that today. But anyway, while I do like this role reversal, I don't think the episode did enough with it. Really, Larry and SpongeBob didn't interact enough in my opinion. I'm not really sure what I would have wanted to see different, but I just feel a little unsatisfied with what we did get, you know? Moving on, as I said, after an unspecified amount of time, Larry wastes away and SpongeBob looks like he's a Patrick exploding away from becoming a warrior pure of heart awakened by rage. Okay, that's the last Dragon Ball joke and or reference, I swear. We watch SpongeBob struggle at work for a bit to somewhat amusing results before he goes back to Larry's gym and eventually ends up leading Larry's exercise class since he's drowning in paperwork. And since SpongeBob leads the class so well, Larry eventually just says that SpongeBob should take over the gym, a position SpongeBob doesn't want, and they both cry over their lives changing for the worst. Until they hug, and all of SpongeBob's muscles are revealed to be the result of just overhydrating. And all Larry needed was a few sit-ups to get right back in shape. Well, all's well that ends in status quo, am I right? Except the episode isn't quite over yet, since we've got one last joke to get in, as it's revealed that Mr. Krabs has been in the steam room for at least a day, turned into a whole cooked crab with butter on the side. Larry's Gym was a good episode. It had some good jokes, though I never really laughed out loud when watching the episode, but that's okay because sometimes I'm just in a mood of not really being overtly reactive. Other times, though, I react to everything, so hard to use that as a metric of whether I enjoy an episode or not. But similar to the previous episode, the fact that I would not strictly call this a funny episode is what precludes it from being in my amazing tier. Instead, it's being put in my great tier, where it comes in with a score of 8.5 out of 10. And that's not shabby at all. I mean, this is the lowest scored episode of Season 9B so far, so that just goes to show how much it's been knocking it out of the park. As always, I'll be ending this video with some closing thoughts of mine. Fun fact about Larry's Gym, but when SpongeBob was like, I'm not good at lifting things, I was taken right out of the episode because there's this SpongeBob lo-fi mix video that I used to listen to a lot during freshman year of college when I was studying and writing essays and stuff, and one of the tracks on that mix used that as a sample. I linked the video in the description for anyone curious, timestamp to the sample so you can hear it. Also, Larry's Gym used a track that I really like, Pacific Blue, so I linked that in the description because why not? And, yeah, I guess that's it for me today, so I suppose now is the time where I'll close things out, and I'll see y'all in the next review.